Capture 7. War Against the Zombies. "Is that all from the book?" asked Fino. Sam explains him that the only continues are spells of Merlin. Both know now they need a lot of help. Sam starts at once a mobile wave and call all vampire he know. He only knows 5, but that was totally enough. He gets all in the line. The rest will be informed by the news. Sam tells them from the book they find in a hidden place in a library in Berlin. At this situation it was better to lie. They didn't want to be guilty for the plague. At the moment nobody was interested who starts the catastrophe. Nobody doubts the report of Sam and Fino, because the book was written in German and signed from Merlin. Like Merlin told them in the book, they buy armor and swords. Now they know the right method to strike back. The worst battles against the zombies happening in cities. From Berlin over Moscow and New York till Tokyo, all cities become overrun. With the help of our vampire contacts, we inform the people about our knowledge in the TV and radio. After they have the knowledge to stop the zombies, the war began in the cities. Everybody stormed the sport and garden working stores, buy and steal all possible weapons. Famous were swords, lances, chain and other saws, machetes, breaking tools, baseball bats, knives, axes, and with surprise wood weapons. It was impossible to stop the giant groups of undead walking meat, but they tried. They were simply too much. The humans seemed to be doomed, but that were also the end of the vampires. We had no choice. We have to come out of our hiding places, show the world that vampire exist, and protect our only food. The blood addicted can't suck blood from zombies. You can't suck rotten blood. For that reason we come into the light and show the world our face. We start to help the humans and slaughtered zombies. At first the humans were very shocked and scared about the existence of vampires, but they get used to it very fast. They thought, zombies existed, why not vampires? After they saw how efficient we vampires slaughtered the stinking walking corpse, they were very pleasured by our existence. They scream in joy and we fight together side by side. The humans collected themselves to groups with one vampire. Every bloodsucker break the legs of the walking dead before the rest of the group start to cut the shit in pieces. It was a shame for Sam and Fino that not all vampires want to do this dirty work for the living. That was the reason the boys start to be an example. After the many years of martial arts exercises, they don't want to do the easy part of the work. They want to cut the zombies in pieces by themselves. For that they buy an original samurai sword from Japan. In a small group of 20 humans, they wasted one witchcraft body after another. Under the people of the group are 8 normal workers. They were experts to swing very precise spades, hammer and axes. Mike, Jim, Klaus and Kevin are normal building worker and carpenters from the same company. Before the disaster, Klaus and Kevin nailed and screwed big beams together and built up roofs. Mike and Jim were bricklayer, who built walls and filled up fundaments with cement, and sometimes they destroy also walls with hammers. Phil, Mac, Paul and Moviko are forestry workers, who timbered big trees. With their mortar saws and axes they were able to timber every tree they want in 5 minutes or less. Depended on the thickness and the density of the trees. From Mac we only know that they call him Mac because he was like MacGyver and was able to construct with waste anything we need. We never find out his right name. Moviko's name was for real Gustav. By the way, his new name was also ridiculous like his original name. But we call him Moviko because he watched every movie and could tell all about it perfect. Very often he talked in movie senses. The most answers were quotations from movie, and in every situation he asked or answered in this kind. It is possible that he never talked normal, because we didn't know all quotations. Some senses sound normal. The rest 12 of the group were an interesting collection of every kind of types. Henry was the silent one. He talks with nobody, and when he says something, it was always hate. Hate about the Walking Dead. The other one tolerated him because he was, after the fighting vampires, a very good slayer. With his super sharp machetes, he cut 4 zombies in pieces in less than 30 seconds. Only Sam and Fino were, with their vampire power, 2 zombies faster than he. In his cutting madness, he always screams in joy all his hate out of his soul about the spelled one. He damned and cursed badly the undead. The others were sometimes afraid when they hear and see what he do. Sometimes Sam and Fino were confused about his behavior and the great pleasure he had by slaying the doomed. But after a few weeks nobody recognized it anymore. Henry never used his weapons against a human. After every struggle, we were very lucky to have him on our side. Instead of the both vampires, he saved every group member's life more than once. We only could guess what happened to him, that he transformed in such a person. In his wallet he carries a picture of a woman and 2 female kids. Although he never says something, but we could picture what happened. Nobody tried to ask him. All thought the same. His wife and kids were victims of this terrible spell. Maybe he have to cut them in pieces by himself. That can transform a man in a madness and crazy guy full of hate like him. Instead of Henry was Dan a talking man. He never could close his mouth. He was a show-off. He liked it to smash heads and break arms and legs with his baseball weapon. Normally we haven't an application for a show-off like him, because with his bad skills he become a danger for us. We didn't want him, but he follow us wherever we go. His talking was a nerve-cracker for us, but he also keep the group stable and tells us a lot of jokes. John and Michael were brothers, who lost their whole family in a zombie storm. They simply didn't know where they should go or what they can do. To slay zombies was the only one it makes sense. What else should they do? No work, their family is dead, and to disable zombies was a needful thing. Also it was a good method for revenge. That's all the same in all groups. Every one of them lost someone and was hungry for revenge. Susan and Anya were one of them, and the only women in the group. Both lost their husbands and children. Those women were ultra strong. Before the apocalypse began, they were usually housewives. It was mostly possible that they get sexually violated in an underground garage, then it was possible that they defend themselves. The zombies changed this totally. After their husbands transformed to zombies because they had an accident or get bitten, they have to watch the terrible death of their children. Their own zombie fathers beat them to death and eat their flesh. Somebody knows now what then happened, but I tell it in the following. They take an axe or a spade and cut the husbands in pieces. As next they treated the big wounds of the children and wait for the transformation. With tears in their eyes, they take a knife and cut their reborn sons and daughters' head and extremities. After they buried their husband and children in their own garden, those women wasn't like before. They changed totally. No man would ever touch them again in violence. Without any martial art training, they were very good with the knife and the axe. No zombie was secure in the near of those women. Their thirsty for revenge was the greatest in the whole group. The last 6 were Sven, Ralph, Maurice, Tim, Simon and Franz. Sven was a tool producer and able to sharpening every weapon. He moved his self-made sickle sharp blades very unusual. It looks like he wanted to sharp a tool, up and down, from right to the left, in equal moves. It looks ridiculous, but he had every time success with it. He didn't need more than 2 cuts to headless an undead with his super sharp weapon. His weapon looks like one of these Klingon swords from Star Trek, and that was exactly what it was. He tells us that except a few improvements, he become inspired from those weapons. Similar weapons he made for Ralph, Simon and Franz. Those guys were totally Star Trek freaks who want to have Klingon swords before the first zombie appear. Their fighting techniques come without a doubt from the television. Against a martial art fighter with less experience, they had no chance to win a fight. But the slow and dumb zombies were an easy prey for them. With their ridiculous swords, they couldn't cut very good heads and extremities, but it was a good weapon to break arms and legs. Maurice and Tim fights with axes, and they learned a lot by cutting wood. Both split excellent heads and have no problem to pieces the zombies on the ground. After the battle, their axes get blunt, but Sven liked it to sharpening them again. For the piecing it was not necessary to have a sharp axe. To cut arms and legs, a blunt axe is good enough. For that reason the most fighters changed after a time to spades. Everyone in the group had a spade as an emergency weapon, or worse, a folding spade on the back. With that they were able to cut arms and legs, also with a blunt edge. For that they only have to jump on the end of the spade, and their weight makes the rest. A strong jump no body part could resist. Tim and Maurice lost their girlfriend on the zombies. Their siblings and parents were still alive, but that were exactly the motivation to slaughter walking corpse. They want to destroy as much as zombies they could to protect their family. The most of those haters were motivated from revenge and become volunteer after they heard that a few vampires searched for humans to free Germany. All members didn't know that Fino and Sam are the best fighters in the world, but that wasn't important. They found the rest of the group on the way. From week to week they collected more volunteers. After a few weeks all find their own way to cut these disgusting creatures as fast as they could in pieces. Sam's favorite was to cut the head at once from the body. His motto was, no head, no biting. The human members of the group could cut the headless corpse in pieces without danger. They hit the dead hiker to rocks, or cut them to pieces like a turkey. Fino instead liked other methods. If the enemies weren't dead, his behavior could call brutal and evil. He had a giant fun to cut the zombies artful in sticks. He loved it to cut off the faces, cut heads in a diagonal way, extracted arms and legs, or to split the corpse in half parts from kidney to kidney. The torso smashed on the ground and the feet walked away. The torso tried then always to move forward with the arms. Once he cut off an arm at first. To avoid to get bitten, he hit out the teeth with a steel stick. Finally he tears out the lower jaw with the stick. We all were very glad that the undead couldn't bleed. If they could, we were covered over and over with blood. For God's sake, it was a very clean job. Only our weapons get dirty. They were jammed with all disgusting liquids of the dead bodies. After the arms and teeth were extracted, Fino wasted a lot of time to slay the zombies. Sometimes he get bored to use the sword and change to the baseball bat. With one in every hand, he smashed and breaks bones in record time. You can clearly hear it, for example, a shin breaks or an arm bone or a neck split in many pieces. Sometimes the neck was heavily broken and the head hang in front or behind torso. That was a very funny view if you have such an humor. When Fino get finished with his victims, they look like a shaking puppet, without strings. The undead lie on the ground and the human in the group could easily cut off the heads and extremities. They used for that axes, spades and other cutting weapons. Susan and Anya were always the first to cut the harmless zombies on the ground. For the headless corpse they need not many time to cut off the arms and legs with spades. After a few times they get bored and want to headless the zombies by their own. The fighting vampires should only break arms and legs. The women want the pleasure of self-cutting. Fino and Sam haven't a problem with that and do it. Sometimes they can't resist and extracted one of the heads. Susan and Anya were not angry about that, because they were totally satisfied to look these monsters in the eye and press the spade blades slowly in the throat of the undead. The view of these both headful women was very confusing and terrible. How much they have to hate these creatures that they take all of them. Fino and Sam were lucky that nobody know that the boys were the reason of this shit. They keep the silence to avoid hate of the group and the whole world. It wasn't the first secret they have to keep, and the death came to visit them if they say a word, if somebody knows about it. Of the 20 humans in the group, there were not many who fight in front side by side next to the vampires. Only Phil, Mac, Henry and Sven fight directly with the zombies, but Sam and Fino keep an eye on them to protect them. More than once, the boys saved the life of the 4. The rest wait behind until the walking stinker lie on the ground. Then they come out and cut them in pieces. Phil was only a builder, but with his 2 meters and the many muscles from the work, he was able to swing his 5-kilogram hammer very precise and devastating. One hit with it against a head or a torso of a zombie and the body part wasn't anymore on the same position. I never thought that it is possible to extract a head from a torso. It were better to fight against the zombies with an axe or a sword, but Phil didn't want to hear about it. He tells them, "What is the fun about that? I like my hammer and it is more fun." And if he swings his hammer in a circle, it was unstoppable. Almost it doesn't matter how many zombies surrounded him. If he swing his hammer in a circle, the walking dead fly away. Mac instead wasn't a better fighter like his other forest workers. During his colleagues preferred to get a wide distance to the undead, he had ridiculous behavior to cut them in pieces with his moto chainsaw. By the way, he finds always new methods to slay the stinkers faster and better. Once he takes a lawn mower and walks through a group of zombies. I believe he saw it in the movie Braindead. Another tool of death was his self-made sickle saw. Every time he amazed us with new toys for killing. But nothing works such perfect than his chainsaw and his sickle saw. For the last he welded 3 sickle blades on a circle saw blade. After the blade cooled down, he changed his motor sickle saw, because he wasn't able to hold it in the original form. The fucking thing worked excellent. With a rotating circle saw blade, the sickles get very dangerous and were able to cut muscles and bones. He only touched the zombies very short and arms, heads or legs fly away. His air pressure hammer welded with a spade blade wasn't a success, although it works perfect. With the heavy weight of the power tool, nobody was able to use it longer than 30 minutes. Also his circle saw blade catapult he have to give up, because he haven't enough blades for a battle. But for a small group it was a nice weapon. Some inventions were good, other wasn't good enough. But he was always full of new ideas. About Sven and Henry there is not more to tell. Henry was with his 2 machetes a human cutting machine, and Sven moved his interesting sharp weapon very perfect. He moved his sword like a stick, but he didn't hit with it, he cut body parts from the torso. The body parts fly through the air when the 6 fighters walk in front. The shaking body parts were after the slaughtering for the urban cleaning service, or we collected them to hills and transport them with lorries to the next canyon or a big hole. With enough earth on the zombie parts, the undead didn't be a danger anymore for the living. Normally the formal humans deserve a funeral, but we haven't the time and no motivation to do that. It was too much, and we didn't win the war yet. Victory wasn't ours at the moment.